Michelle Graves, your host on today's segment of The Power of Money. I'm glad to have you here. Now, at The Power of Money, we are interested in three things happening. First, we want you to get the necessary education so that you and your family can make the decisions that will impact positively on you in your financial life. The second thing is that you be empowered to prosper. I only want the best for you. And you can only get that if you have education and then the drive to make it happen. And the third thing that is so important to me is that you recognize that life is more than a journey, and that you be energized so that you can begin to participate in the truly joyous experience of living. So here's to empowerment, here's to education, and here's to energy. I'm Michelle Graves, your host, Power of Money, and here we go. And welcome to today's segment of The Power of Money. I'm your host, Michelle Graves. And again, it's an honor and a privilege to be able to share with you my world and empower you with information. I have a remarkable guest on by Skype today. And so many of you are now familiar that in the world of television and media, given the coronavirus, that we are doing a lot of our shows via Skype, which is a venue that connects us all over the world, or Zoom. So today we're going to be interviewing a remarkable woman who's written a phenomenal book, Bari Roberts-Ross. The name of the book is Stronger with Two. And before you come to any opinions, you want to watch this interview, because let me give you a little bit of background before we get into the meat of the show. Bari Roberts-Ross is a 10-year head and neck cancer survivor. She's the past volunteer chair of the Winship Cancer Institute's Patient and Family Advisors, a member of the Emory Healthcare PFA Council, and a Winship peer partner. She serves as a patient advocate on the National Cancer Institute's Head and Neck Metastatic and Recurrent Task Force and Patient Advocate Steering Committee member. Her husband, Charles, is a 10-year survivor of acute lymphoblastic leukemia and a 2-year survivor of Hodgkin's lymphoma. Now, the reason I'm having her on this show is because her journey through cancer and surviving, and her husband's journey as well, puts them in a distinct category of miraculous. And this book that she wrote, which I strongly recommend that you purchase, it's not that expensive, it's an excellent book, will give you insights into her journey, as well as her experience with the possibility of dying, and her experience in dealing with her husband and all the people around her. Miss Ross is a remarkable person. She is a former, I knew her from high school. We both grew up in Cincinnati, Ohio, but she's gone on to do great and amazing things in her chosen field. I want you to relax. I want you to listen to her story, and just know that she is the kind of a woman that inspires people to get through dark days. And if you think that you are having dark days, just keep living. If you haven't had any dark days, keep living. Life is just that way. So it's my honor and distinct privilege to talk to this remarkable woman about her journey through cancer and being a survivor, as well as her husband's simultaneous journey with cancer. It does happen, and people do get through it with great dignity. And again, she wrote a book. So without further ado, let me introduce to all of you Bari Roberts-Ross, who will be talking about her story as reflected in this outstanding book, Stronger with Two. I read it from beginning to end, and then I read it again. And so we're going to get started with this interview right now. Thank you. How are you?
I am well. How are you?
I am so glad that you were able to get through the technical challenges we've had and to complete this interview because I really do want to talk to you about this book and about your perspective and some of the things that you have experienced as a result of this book, but prior to this book. So, where do we want to begin?
Well, let's start at the beginning.
Okay, that's good.
That's great. That's a great place.
Okay.
Um, so, you know, I think about my journey and why I wrote the book. Lots of people survive cancer. Actually, in this day and time, survivors are the fastest growing group in the cancer world. And so that's the good news.
Okay.
That many more people are surviving, that it's not necessarily you hear the words, you've got cancer, and it's a death sentence. So that's positive. And when I sat down to write the book, I wanted to be positive. I had to take people from the beginning of our journey right up to today. And it seems as though I was able to do that from the feedback I've been given. But in 2009, my husband and I were living in Phoenix, Arizona. We had a small business out there, a restaurant. And my husband, in late 2008, started having symptoms of we didn't know what, and every doctor he went to was not able to come up with a diagnosis. So we got through the early part of 2009, and he was referred to another doctor, to an ear, nose, and throat doctor, who did some tests that suggested that there was something seriously wrong with him. And I went to, I think, the third meeting with the ENT, and he's discussing these symptoms with my husband, and my husband said, oh, well, you need to look at my wife, because even though I have nodules, which is what we call them at the time, she has one also. So the doctor looked at me thinking maybe we had something infectious going on. He was giving it to me, I was giving it to him. But when he looked at me, he says, need you to take a test tomorrow. And I said, okay.
Wow.
Yeah. He said, I'm very suspicious of where the nodule is on you. He said, your husband, I'm not certain, but I've scheduled him for a biopsy. The next day I was there, he put a needle in the nodule, and 2 days later he came back and he said, I don't know what's wrong with your husband, but you have cancer. And we found cancer cells through the needle biopsy. Well, I was stunned, but not broken.
Okay.
Some people get broken when they hear that. I was stunned. And so I asked him, I said, so what's the next step? And he said, well, I'm going to send you for a scan. Went for the scan. 2 days later, after that, he said, this is very serious. It's spread. And I think it's stage 4. And my whole life changed with that.
My word.
So I still challenged him. I was still not upset, but concerned. And when we went to Walnut Hills, when we went to high school, we had very good teachers.
Yes.
And I will never forget, and it just served me well throughout my life, that one of the teachers, I think it was geometry, and he always started the class with, define the problem, solve the problem. So if you don't have a clear definition of what the problem is, you can't solve it. You can work on it, you can play with it, but you can't solve it. And so that's the first thing that popped in my mind. Solve this problem, okay? Define this problem so we can solve it, whatever the solution is. So I told him after he looked at the scans and everything, I said, so what's the next step? And he said, well, I've talked to these very good doctors who can probably help you with this and have great success with this kind of cancer, but they don't take your insurance. So we went down the list of all of the
Oh,
excellent doctors who could help me. Yeah, here's where it gets very serious. Besides having the cancer definition, uh, they don't take my insurance. So I talked to him for a few more minutes, and it was obvious that he did not have a solution or a next step toward a solution.
right.
So he said, well, I found somebody in this book. I don't know them. I know these other guys. I don't know them, but I found somebody in this book of doctors. And, I called him up and he'll see you in 6 weeks. I said,
No,
6 weeks?
no,
Yeah.
oh, no,
Oh, yeah.
oh no.
6 weeks.
Six
And
weeks. Okay.
so I said, 6 weeks and it's metastasized, it's spreading, it's aggressive, and I have to wait 6 weeks to even be seen. Give me and I humbly requested my pathology report and my scan because I knew we were done. I said, still continue. I will see you Friday at the hospital for my husband's biopsy. So we meet at the biopsy, and no. So prior to that, I called my daughter, and I'm in Atlanta now, and she worked at the cancer hospital, the Winship Cancer Hospital here in Atlanta. And I sent her all my information, and in less than 12 hours, she called me, and she said, Mom, you've got to come to Atlanta, and I made plane reservations for you to come tonight.
Oh my word.
So, yeah.
Oh,
So I told her, I said, I can't leave my husband. His biopsy is in a couple of days. Let me do some arrangements. So I arranged for his sister to come shortly after his biopsy and for me to leave to go to Atlanta. So that Friday, we went to his biopsy. The doctor came back and told me, he says, I think your husband has lymphoma. I'm not sure. We'll have to wait for the biopsy. And how are you doing, Mrs. Ross? And I said, I'm doing fine. I'm on my way to Atlanta tomorrow. And he said, what? And I said, I'm going to the Winship at Emory. He says, well, they're one of the top ones. And I said, yeah, and they're not concerned about my insurance. They're concerned about my life, as am I.
whew.
Yes.
Oh my God. Continue.
So I left,
Ah,
came to Atlanta, went to the hospital immediately, started getting more tests. And in the middle of all of my tests, my husband's calls, and his sister who came to be with him calls and says he has acute lymphoblastic leukemia and he is inconsolable. And they wanted to put him in the hospital right there in Phoenix that day to start treatment. But he wanted to come and be with me. So my daughter goes back to the people she worked with at Emory, and they said, put your dad on the plane, and we will treat both of them.
whoo, my goodness. God
Amazing.
bless those people. God bless those
Amazing.
people.
God bless the situation.
Yes.
He
Yes.
did. He blessed
Yes.
the situation.
Yes.
Saw everything, and he made it. He made the situation tolerable, or at least so we could begin to solve the problems.
Yes. Yes.
So over the next few weeks, it was too much for my daughter to try to be a caregiver for both of us. And even though my husband was in the hospital 6 weeks, every day getting chemotherapy, 23 hours a day.
Jiminy. Oh
I
my
became
God.
an outpatient because I had to get chemo and radiation. And I was getting radiation every day and chemo every 2 weeks. And it just became too much for her.
Yes.
So my family put together a plan because caregiving is a bear. It is just all by itself. Worrying about the patient, driving the patient, feeding the patient, trying to understand what the doctors are saying. And if anybody is going through cancer, you need somebody else with you. It is not a singular journey. You need a caregiver. You need somebody to drive you, care for you, feed you, do whatever applications that have to be done at home with the medicines and the machines or whatever is going on. It is a giant task. And one of the things I found out is that caregivers do not get enough credit. They do not get enough support. And they do not get enough gratitude.
Ooh-wee. Now you said a lot, because that's what I'm walking through now.
So many people are, and it's not
Oh,
just cancer. It's not just cancer that people are walking through this COVID. I mean, even now, where they're sending people home who still need a ton of care. People don't walk out of there 100% healthy, 100% anything. They walk out of there diminished.
mm,
They walk out of there still needing care. Some of it's short term care, and believe it or not, a lot of it's long term care
I
because they're
believe it.
still discovering the after effects of the COVID, just like there are many after effects of cancer.
Mm. Hopefully, we'll be able to talk about those after effects. Have you experienced, just moving, we're going to go back, but have you experienced after effects from your cancers?
Oh, sure, both of us have.
Okay.
They're not, at first, when you hear the word, you know, no evidence of disease or
Mm-hmm.
remission or however your doctor presents it, you think, boy, I am great. You know, I can go
Uh-huh.
forward. But a lot of the treatment, the chemotherapy uh, the chemotherapy alone creates changes in your body, and many of them are lasting. The neuropathy, the nerve endings on
Mm-hmm.
your fingers and hands, and that, you know, sometimes it diminishes and sometimes it just stays. The scarring. Both of my husband and I are dealing with scarring. I had scarring from the surgery and the radiation to my neck.
Right.
And I still go every week to get PT, physical therapy, because the scarring sometimes it makes it difficult to turn my head, you know, or
Okay.
to be comfortable. I still have long-term swallowing effects. There's still lots of foods that I liked before that I can't tolerate anymore. I can't swallow them. A lot
Okay.
of meats and stuff like that.
That is really very, very interesting. So there is a long-term monitoring process for this whole thing, correct? It's
Oh,
not,
sure, the
it's
rest of our lives.
the rest of
Yeah,
your lives.
yeah.
My words. So go back to, let's continue. So your husband flew to Atlanta and he's in the hospital for 6 weeks. Are you caregiving him at that time?
Could visit him the first 2 weeks. I was still up and functioning, and I could leave my appointments and go over and see him at the hospital and spend some time with him. After the first 2 weeks, I was debilitated. I
Oh,
could barely stand up from the chemo and
right.
the nausea. And then I lost the ability to swallow, to eat. So I had a feeding tube.
Oh my
And so
God.
I became very weak and not able to care for myself
Okay.
or to bless him, yes.
So in this scenario, he's at the hospital and you're in outpatient dealing with radiation and chemo.
Yes,
And who
simultaneously.
simultaneously now is your daughter trying to hold up taking care of you and working at the Cancer Institute?
She and my daughter was trying to hold up taking care of me, and she got pregnant.
Oh,
So
oh, oh,
now
oh, oh.
she's pregnant, and my youngest daughter came down several times. My youngest daughter came down from DC to help as much as she could, but then
Okay.
she was working full time. So
Right.
what she did was, which I think was brilliant and life-saving for all of us, she put together a list. She put together a team, as I call it, a team of angels. So she called his sisters and said, "Can you come down this week and help?" And she called some of my friends, a few of my friends who were here, that I knew in Atlanta, and said, anything you could do, anything, if you can drive, if you can come sit with my mom, if you can, you know, fix food. I mean, she put together a team that looked like a airline controller,
Mm.
the air
Okay.
controller. People were coming in and coming out, and she had it precise. So I always call that was our team of angels.
Okay. And your daughter from Washington, D.C. put that together.
Yes, she did.
That's amazing.
And it's something that, it's interesting because since I wrote the book and I talked about that, because people always think, oh, it's the wife, oh, it's the kids or whatever. A lot of people have called and said, thank you for writing that and thank you for showing us that, because it's not something we had considered.
Well, I think it's an extremely good alternative, particularly given children's responsibilities today. People are working and trying to pay their bills and dealing with children, and this at least gives them a way to help without being overwhelmed.
Right.
I think that's important.
I think it's extremely important. The more I talk to caregivers in the work that I do now, and like I said, the burdens that they have, when I try to offer them some other alternatives, such as the one we had, or other considerations, they are so uplifted.
I'm telling you, that is an extremely powerful way to get other people engaged in the process, to expose them, because I'm going to tell you something, Bari. I am convinced behind my own journey with this as a caregiver that if you live long enough, you're going to be in that situation. Somebody in your family is going to need help. And it's going to weigh on the family very tremendously as to how to do this in the face of children and husbands and all kinds of other things. It's a very lonely journey.
Yes, it is.
So how?
And it's not something you think about or talk about enough.
I think it needs to be talked about, because I know that this is a quiet, miserable way to try to get through a difficult situation. I mean, when people talk about cancer or all these other diseases, Alzheimer, everything, it requires time, energy, and effort. It literally does.
Right.
Or else everything just kind of falls apart.
Yeah, it requires a team. It is so unfair in a family, or a family, friends, angels, however other people show up. It is so unfair to think that one person, when someone has a chronic disease, that one person can handle it. I have seen, I didn't experience it, but I have seen with all of the patients that I deal with all over the United States, where a caregiver ends up sicker than the patient.
I believe it.
It's a dying, trying to take care of someone singularly.
Because they didn't know what their options were.
Right, and they didn't think to create other options.
Right, and to ask other people for help.
Right.
How receptive or responsive do you feel that when your daughter began to reach out, were people very receptive to helping her in your situation?
More were receptive. There were some people, including close families, and close family members, and I discuss it in the book openly, who wouldn't even consider it, who didn't want to be bothered, who I put it like this, they turned their backs on us. And those were the people who, at the time, I just had to let it go. I just had to let it go. They're not coming, they're not calling, they're not offering, $2 to buy anything. And I personally, at the time, had to let it go. My husband was anguished by it.
Oh my gosh.
Where are they? Why aren't they coming? Why aren't they calling? And it wasn't until we got to the other side until we were both in remission and we were both trying to go on with their lives, that I was able to actually look at it and process it. And then I was so angry. I was just very angry.
I cannot believe you wouldn't be. It's horrible.
Yes.
I mean, you spoke openly in the book about that. I appreciate you doing that.
Very openly.
No, it's helped me. It's helped me, Bari. It has helped me. I read this book The first time I read because I just wanted to read it, and I read it until I finished, and then I
Yes.
was like, wow, wow, and then I read it again slowly, and then marked the book up, and then the third time I read it because some of the things you said just resonated with in my own life situation with the how people are not there. And when you see what happens when people are in the midst of tragedy, and how there are just some people, especially and sadly, family, children,
Yeah. Yes.
they're the glibness of it all, the
Hmm.
glibness of it all. It just was so sad. Do you think this is a part of this society that we are moving quickly into, which is that you better work it out the best way you can and have a nice day?
I think I won't say it's societal, but I definitely think it's an indication of there are certain people who don't have it in them to be empathetic, sympathetic, um, or just to care. Like I said, it doesn't have to be all encompassing. Nobody was asking them shut down your life and come, but not to do anything, not to
Nothing.
do anything
Nothing.
was very, like I said, when we got to the other side, my husband was concerned the whole time and it was eating him up. When we got to the other side and it started just tearing me apart, I had to find a way to
Yes.
forgive them, and that was so hard initially. It was
Yes.
just like every day I would wake up and I would say the same thing you said. How dare you? How dare you? How could you? Why did you? Asking myself questions that they had the answers to. And I
Ooh.
was just getting more and more frustrated. So one of the things that I said in the book, I had to learn to forgive, which was big. But I also had to tell myself forgiveness doesn't reward them with my trust.
Right. Right.
Never. So
Never.
never will I trust these same people again. There's no trust there. And one of the things that I also know about me, and like I said, forgive them so I can help heal me.
Right.
But one of the things I also know about me is that I'm not around a lot of people that I don't trust.
Right. 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 Well, I think that when you're in the midst of this type of a um, situation where hope is what you're holding on to,
Yes.
it's what you're holding on to. It gives substance to what you're dealing with. And then to have that kind of negativity plopped around, that would just have to be have a nice day and goodbye.
Yeah.
And the forgiveness thing, which I find very, very interesting that you say this. What did it do for you to be able to forgive?
Well, it did a lot for me. It let me release all of the anger and the disappointment. It let me just release it. And what I learned is forgiveness is for you. You think, it's for you. Just to recognize who they are, the situation, or who they are or the situation you're in. And it also opened my eyes very clearly to, and I'm going to say this kindly, is
Okay.
that sometimes you just have to let people go no matter what their title is in your life.
Right.
And it's heartbreaking and it's
And I would
hard,
think it
but
would be
it's
hard.
necessary. It's
Mm-hmm.
necessary.
Mm. So what do you just when you don't communicate with them any further, or you just
I chose I choose not to. I choose
mhm.
not to communicate. I choose not to have them in my life
Okay.
because I don't trust them. I can't my rule, I deal with people that I trust. A very transparent person. I'm very open. I am not perfect, but I don't want to be looking over my shoulder.
No. Oh
I don't
no.
want the
No.
person that looks back.
No. And I would think that as you've grown older, that becomes more and more important, is
Very.
to try to keep people out of your space that don't mean you good.
Right.
It just, that would, particularly
You're
given
right.
this, yeah, I would kind of think so. So you and your husband had to walk through this as a team, and you built
That's
other situations around that.
right. And that's why I named the book Stronger with Two, because when I was writing the book, I never had I didn't have a title for the book until maybe a month, maybe a
Okay.
month or two before I published it. And
Okay.
I worked on the book for 4 years.
You
I was
worked, this
writing it
book was
coming.
this is a 4-year journey of writing.
Yes,
Ooh wee,
of writing.
that's a
One of
lot.
the reasons it was 4 years because once we got over the first cancers that we had together, and then it took me a while, to heal, to get
Right.
strong, to be clear. And so when I started writing the book in 15, when I started writing the book in
Ooh
2015,
wee.
was making a lot of progress working on it, and then was just about to publish it. And then my husband got a second cancer.
My words. Oh, how did that
So
make you feel?
it it wasn't, let me put it like this, and I'm not diverting your question. It wasn't so much how I felt, it was how he felt.
Oh,
And
right.
I covered that very deeply in the book. When we found out he had a second cancer, I was I'm the cheerleader. I was like, okay, we've done it before, we'll do it again.
Yeah.
Uh, we know so much more than we did before. We know the people at Winship. We know
Yeah.
the cancer language, which is a whole nother book of learning
Yes.
how
Yes.
what they're saying to you, what it means, how you can deal with it. So I thought we had a strong advantage. He, on the other hand, was devastated.
Whew.
He was, wait a minute, I've already had a cancer. I've already beat the cancer. What is this again? Why is this back in my life? What did I do wrong?
Oh,
Uh, the whole questioning thing.
right.
And then he surprised me with something that I thought we both had dealt with, and he was ashamed. And I was not
Mm.
expecting that. He was feeling a certain shame of having it again.
Of
And
having
I,
a disease again.
yes, yes.
Okay.
And a lot of people are ashamed to say they have cancer. They're embarrassed by it. They blame themselves. Oh, it's because I ate this or took
Mm-hmm.
this, did this. And I had learned from my first cancer, which the cancer I have, most people who get it are smokers, drinkers,
Right. Right.
use street drugs. Uh, it's a lot of it is behavioral.
Mm-hmm.
And when I showed up at the hospital with the cancer that I had and didn't fit in into those categories, and the doctor said, you have a cell, anybody that has a cell can get a cancer.
Uh, that's, I think all humans have it in us. It's just
Exactly.
what
We
triggers,
do.
what
It's what
triggers.
triggers.
Yeah, it's just,
Yeah.
and I don't know, and of course I'm not a doctor or certainly not an oncologist, but it just seems to me that it's just a lot we don't know.
Absolutely.
I mean, it
Babies
just,
are born with it. I mean, when I saw babies, babies are born with it. So it's just something in the human genome.
yeah, I think you're right. It is something, and we haven't been able to turn that switch off.
Yeah.
Do I
Yeah.
believe there's an answer? Barry, I believe that there is an answer. I have to have that hope.
Oh,
Because again, it's just not clear cut how to come to a permanent solution. And you're right, when you see children that are born, you know it's in the genotype. How the heck did this child birth with cancer? Because
Exactly.
it's in the genotype of the child and probably the mother, but
Oh,
yeah, as well. So continue on. So Charles is now diagnosed with cancer again,
right.
and he's going through
After eight
shame.
years, after 8 years, no evidence of cancer, in remission, and it's pretty much started the same way the first one did. He was tired, he couldn't move, he couldn't get enough sleep, he started losing weight, he had this horrible cough. The last time he didn't have the first cancer, the leukemia, he didn't have a cough, but he had this horrible cough and it wouldn't go away. And
Oh,
again, the same marching orders: test, biopsy, boom, Hodgkin's
mm,
lymphoma in his lungs. It was in his lungs.
in
And
his lungs.
I was cheerleading him. Yes, I was cheerleading him, and he was so morose. And then when he said to me, "Okay, you and I are going to keep this a secret," I said, "What? How are we going to keep this a secret?" I said, "My daughter comes over here, the grandbaby comes over here, we have friends." I said, "Charles, I'm not comfortable with that. Just keeping it a secret." I said, "No, we don't need to call everybody we called before."
Right.
I said, but if something happens to you, I do think your family, your other family, your sisters
Yeah.
and other people need to know." And
Right.
I said, and plus I said, it's very insulting because people aren't blind.
Nope.
Uh,
Nope. Nope.
So I let him stay in denial for about 2 days.
Okay, 2 days.
About
That's that's
48
that's
hours I
good.
was
Yeah,
doing.
2 days. That's long
Just,
enough. That's enough.
yeah,
That's enough. Yep,
just
yep,
sleep
yep,
on it, work it
yep,
out,
yep, yep.
emotionally and mentally. And then I
Right.
told him, I said, "Look, you've got to go to the doctor. We've got to go to the hospital, and we've got to see the pulmonologist, and we've got to start treatment." I said, "So I'm going to tell my daughter Brooke, who lives here, who's the one that helped us at first." I
Right.
said, "There's no, I cannot tell her." And he said, "Okay, tell her." So I called her up. I think I called her up and I sent her again all of the forms,
Okay.
everything we had received from the
Okay.
hospital with the diagnosis. And she went with us to the first appointment.
Okay.
And the thing about the Hodgkin's lymphoma that made it very different and that really turned everything around is that it's very curable and it's very treatable.
Oh, wow.
It is
Okay.
one of those cancers that is very curable and very treatable. But the treatment was for my husband, because he had used so much of the protocol, the
Mhm.
same protocol in the other cancer,
Okay.
that there wasn't a whole lot of room to give him enough of the treatment
Okay.
without it affecting his heart or
Oh,
one of
wow.
his other organs. So
Hmm.
we were walking a tightrope on that.
So the,
We were,
the the protocol under his first cancer, is it from the medication that's still in his system that keeps you from doing that the second time around? Uh,
it's it's that your system can only take. He had used 100. He had used 85%. Let's just say he had used 85% of those medications to
okay.
put him in remission. And let's just say he needed another 50 or 60%, but he only had 15 or 15% left. And
Okay.
it's kind of
Okay.
messy.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
Mm. That.
So they had to walk a tightrope in giving him the second medication. They had to be creative and go outside of the protocol and introduce some new medications.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you're trying to live a normal life. And
Hmm.
I must say this, I know, did the medical bills ever bother you? Were you all just cool with it? I mean, that's millions of dollars,
Oh, yes, it
Barry.
is.
I
Yes,
mean,
it is.
really, that's a lot of money. And your carriers will not step to the table when you start talking about sums like that.
Hmm.
How'd
Hmm.
you handle that?
Okay. So with the first two cancers, Because, and this again, whatever you believe, whatever you call it, whether it's God, Allah, whatever, your choice. I don't, say
Right,
one thing over
right,
the other.
right, right.
But when we came to Winship, because our situation was so unique, they basically treated us for nothing.
Oh, my words.
It's just such a blessing
Are you
because I
kidding
wanted to
me?
step. It's a university school. It's a university. They do 100% research on everything, and because we represented such a unique case,
Right.
both separate and apart. My husband's first cancer was the cancer that children get. And here
Ah,
he presented at 62 years old with a childhood cancer.
ah,
Mine was so unique that um, an African American woman was hardly on the charts for the kind of cancer that I had.
okay.
And then the two of us at the same time,
Oh, that's
it
just,
represented a rare opportunity for them to test, do things, look
mm-hmm.
at, chart us together.
Right.
So we were blessed with that. And my daughter
Oh,
working there, that was just such a
oh,
blessing. We were,
oh, unbelievable. I'm like the very
yes,
institution that is like she had been positioned there because God knew
yes,
you could not be in Phoenix, Arizona with doctors counting coins.
yes.
I'm serious.
And so the whole thing, which is why I wrote the book, was just unbelievable. It's just unbelievable. The second cancer that my husband got, by that time, he had retired, we were on Medicare, um, and again, Emory, Winship was, oh my gosh, they were, whatever Medicare took,
Right,
whatever Medicare paid, they took. We had lots of co-payments,
right,
small,
right.
nothing major, major, major. And because they wanted to study him further, because that was unusual, again, they were very gracious um, in providing a lot of it at not free, but at minimal cost to
Right,
us.
right. Well, I know that Medicare would be essential, but I know those
Yes,
co-pays are something. And
right.
specialized medicine and cancer, um, that can get very, very, very expensive. It can. And of course, Medicare does not cover so many of the expenses that you incur uh, with cancer, someone to watch you and to care for you.
Right.
Those caregiving functions are typically not included. I mean, that's just something, I just think of the stress, but I guess that's not what you were thinking about at the time, which is the financial stress of the both of you trying to make it through a very difficult series of events.
Well, what I knew, and certainly, the money, most of the money that we spent were
Uh-huh.
on the scans that Medicare didn't cover 100%. And those
Right.
scans, a lot of those CAT scans and PET scans are very, very expensive. But what I knew from the first cancer, and what I've learned through my life, is that
Okay.
sacrifices have to be made. There were sacrifices, and if I stood in the space where all I was concerned about was the money, then it would have been about the money. My
Right.
fight, our fight, everyone's fight is about survival.
Right.
And if we had to sacrifice not buying this, not going here, not
Mm-hmm.
doing that,
Mm-hmm.
as long as we could survive.
Right.
And let me go back. When we went through our first, you're talking sacrifice. When we went through our first cancer, we lost everything. I
Oh,
mean, our restaurant in Phoenix, we just walked away from it. We weren't able to sell it. We don't even know what happened to it to this day.
right,
We
right.
walked away from our house. We lost everything. That was our
Ooh,
payment. We just sacrificed. And then
yeah.
we had to start all over again.
in a new city.
In a new city. We had to find new housing. I mean, for 2 years, we lived in a senior complex after we moved out of my daughter's house because we couldn't just stay with her and her
No,
family.
no,
And we
no.
rebuilt. We had to
Yes,
rebuild.
yes. But I think, and when I read this book, and for those of you that are watching in, I'm going to say again, just for those of you just tuning in, I'm in the middle of interviewing Bari Roberts Ross, who is a 10-year head and neck cancer survivor. On top of that, her husband had cancer simultaneously, and she talks about their journey in a very transparent and open way. The book is named Stronger with Two, and Bari, you can certainly give them information on how they can get this book, because it's amazing. It is absolutely amazing how you told the story in such a way that anybody reading this story can relate to not what you went through, but can relate to how disease cripples families and cripples the individual. How you kept your positivity is beyond me. I mean, really, because this is rough. And to look at your family and I mean, this is an amazing journey. It's an amazing story. And it's a story that as many people as I can expose to your story, I do. I tell them because I want them to know that it could happen to them, and that there are ways to prepare, how to keep your soul intact in terms of positive energy, what a person needs to do to keep things going. I mean, it's just heavy stuff. It really, really is, Bari. But I thank you for your courage in pubbing the book. And may I ask you, because you went on and just did it yourself. You just pubbed it yourself.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, right now, the publishing industry, one of the things, one of the things that I had to learn was that the publishing industry has changed quite a bit.
Okay.
And memoir, which is what this is usually associated with very famous people.
Huh. Didn't know that.
Memoir writing, I mean, not a lot of people can go and write a memoir and get Simon and Schuster or Putnam or any of those, unless, like Michelle Obama,
yes.
or famous people. And so when I was writing the book and when I was talking to people, everybody kept saying, why don't you write a how-to book? Those sell.
How-to book.
Yeah. A how-to book, or those sell. Or why don't you write a tell-all, rip the covers off the health industry book?
Right.
And so I was getting all of these ideas when I was talking to traditional publishers, but neither of those were my story, and neither of those, were my spirit as well.
Right.
How-to book, you get cancer, you go here, you do this, you do that. That's not how my mind works.
Right.
Or you go to the hospital and they don't do this and they don't do that, or they're horrible, or their patient care isn't wonderful. That was not my experience. So I couldn't write that. My experience at Winship and Emory was not that.
Right.
So I couldn't write that. That would have been a total betrayal. And that, again, is not me, just for $1, just not me. So I kept writing the book that I wanted to write. And I kept submitting it and kept getting, the same answers.
Right.
Why don't you take this chapter and turn this around? So being the stubborn Leo that I am.
That I love about you.
Being the stubborn Leo that I am, I said, okay, let me start thinking about self-publishing. And I did, and I started interviewing. I interviewed several people or several organizations that help you self-publish.
Right.
And I stumbled upon this young lady here in Atlanta, and I sent her part of my manuscript, and she
Okay.
came and she said, "You have got to do this." She said, "One of the things that they didn't tell you when you were talking to the traditional publishers is that, yeah, you either have to be famous or you have to have a heck of a story. You, Miss Ross, have a heck of a story.
Yes, you do.
And I will do everything in my power to help you get it out."
And did she?
And she did. And
Wonderful.
so she and I collaborated for months. And actually, it really wasn't that long. Maybe from November to January, we collaborated.
Okay. Okay.
Because I had, the book had been edited and I'd gone through so many iterations. And she helped me get it out. So another angel showed up to help me on my.
So can you give us information, because our time is now concluding, and I surely appreciate your insights, and I admire you so much as a survivor, as a strong woman who handles her business, even in the midst of something as challenging as this. It still has propelled you to even another level. So if you would mind telling people how they can get your book.
Well, my book is available. I have a bookstore.
Oh, that's fine. You might as well.
Yeah. I have a bookstore. Again, one of the things I learned is, sell your own product. Just don't give it to somebody else.
Right.
So I have a bookstore. It's very simple. Strongerwith2.com.
Okay, that's simple. Strongerwith2.com.
If you order from my bookstore, you get a signed copy, and I will mail it to you instantaneously. But it's also available on Amazon in the Kindle version and in the paperback version.
Okay. Well, I tell you, this is so absolutely amazing. The content, the transparency, the information, and I can only say to you and Charles, you've been blessed with a wonderful husband, that I can only wish you the very, very best in this endeavor. And as you move forward, despite COVID-19, we will get through this and on to some other things. So I just want to wish you only the very best, Bari Roberts Ross, and just honored to be counted among your friends.
Thank you, Michelle. You're wonderful.
Oh, I love you so much, and I'm so grateful that you're still alive. And by the way, I want to thank you for that mention that you made about my company, Shaology. Awesome. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
You're welcome. Have a great day. And my viewers, we have been interviewing Bari Roberts Ross on her phenomenal book, Stronger with Two, about a love story, really, a love story of two people, husband and wife, both had cancer, extraordinary journey, lots of information and insight to help you if you're in the middle of a health challenge. And many of us out here are with our families. This is a book that you need to buy and read and be encouraged, and encourage other people to get it as well. It is remarkable. But thank you for being a part of today's session on The Power of Money with Michelle Graves. And I do appreciate so much you being a part of my interview with Bari Roberts Ross on her journey. Thank you. You be blessed. And we'll talk soon. Bye-bye.